minutes, Bill.
of the Acushnet Board of Health to order May 14, 2024 at 5:06. Everybody can silence their phones. This meeting is being audio and videotaped. We're just going to follow the agenda, folks.
Can you speak up, please, because it's hard to hear
I'm
back.
not a yeller, I'll do the best I can, but
Okay.
Thank you.
we're going to just follow the agenda, and when we get to PJ Keating, we get to PJ Keating. Mr. Medeiros can't take part in the conversation, so he has to leave, so we're, out of courtesy to him, we're going to take care of the rest of the agenda, which isn't long, it's not much. First order of business, we have correspondence. We have a letter from the Community Nurse and Home Care Statistics from March 2024. Actually, what am I reading? This is the minutes of the last meeting. Where's the agenda? Oh, I am. I'm sorry. It's June 4th, 2024. I was reading the minutes of the last meeting. I'm sorry. Let me see. Yeah, it was open, yeah.
Hey Joe, did I give you my minutes down here? Flip back.
Yes.
So let's start over. This is June 4th, 2024. So first order of business, correspondence, letter from Community Nurse and Home Care Statistics for April 2024. Review of matters presented, votes may be taken.
A motion to file. Second motion.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Approval of septic design plans, subdivision plan review, we have none on the agenda. Next item, discussion, contract for public health nursing. Review of matters presented, votes may be taken. Joe, if I remember correctly, we had some changes that were going to be made and updated.
Yep, they were incorporated in, and community nurse signed it with the changes.
I'll make a motion to accept the contract specified.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Motion carries. We have minutes to approve from May 14, 2024. We were all in attendance.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve minutes. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Can we get a motion to sign the vouchers?
Motion to sign vouchers. Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Motion carries. So that brings us to appointments. PJ Keating, to provide the board with an update of plant operation, review of matters presented, votes may be taken.
I'll mention one little thing, okay, before I leave about COVID-19. There's a lot of it going around town. So advice to the people that if you feel that you don't feel right, don't feel good, I think we still have tests in the office there.
Still have some, yeah.
So if you feel that you don't feel right, don't feel good, fevers, shakiness, come by and we'll hook you up with a test kit. That'll be at the Potty Way School.
Oh.
Second floor, there's an elevator if you need it. You can take the elevator up to the second floor, okay? Could everybody hear me back there?
Yep.
Excuse me, fellas, I have to go.
Good enough? So what I want to do is PJ Keating has a presentation that they want to start out with. We will allow anybody and everybody that wants to get up and speak about anything that they've encountered in the past month or so. And then we'll just kind of go from there. So with that, I'll hand the mic over to you, Mr. Leger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luke Leger, McGregor, Leger, and Stevens. I represent PJ Keating Company. As the chairman just noted, we are here this evening to give the board an update. Just to put this in context, the board and PJ Keating entered into an agreement through the court whereby Keating is allowed to operate the HMA plant for a period of about 3 months, 90 days. During that time, we agreed, among other things, to come meet with the Board of Health once monthly, essentially to report on what's been done to date, what days we've been operating, complaints received, responses to those complaints, and then answer any other questions that the board may have for us. So that's certainly why we're here this evening. I do have a presentation loaded up here, as you noted. This is a little different than the one that we sent at the end of last week. It's got those slides that you have, but we've beefed it up a little bit with some additional information as well. So just so you're aware, as you're following through, it won't all track perfectly. But with me here this evening, Derek Hill, is the president of PJ Heating Company. We have other PJ Heating employees here also. I'm not going to name each and every one of them. But also Lou Rose from Alliance Technical Group, who is an outside consultant working with PJ Heating. And I'll let him better describe his qualifications for you later. But essentially, he is an expert consultant trained in identifying and measuring odors like that with your company. So without further ado, unless you have a question.
I just want to say, if we could hold questions, let him finish the presentation, and then we can take any questions directed at Mr. Legier, Mr. Hill, or whomever, the board, wherever you want.
Yeah, thank you. That would be appreciated. Thank you for that. Okay, great.
So Derek Hill, president of PJ Heating. They say time flies when you're having fun, and this is my third season. So appreciate the opportunity to come and discuss what we've been doing at the asphalt plant, and we're going to go back to like 2022, where we were issued a cease and desist order from the town, and kind of take it from there as to the things we've been doing on the property. Next slide. So community engagement. PJ, we're invested in being a good corporate citizen. Since the 2000s, we've between money, materials, time, over $675,000 have been put into the community in the area. That includes things with schools, food drives, breakfasts, all of that. So, in 2023, we raised over $26,000 at our customer golf tournament right here at Pleasant Valley in Acushnet. All of that money has gone to the school. We had additional community engagement every fall. We do a food drive where we weigh the food, and then we match dollar for dollar. And we did that at all the facilities at Keating. It's been a great success. I'm truly proud of the work that PJ Keating employees do. Well, when it comes to our food drives and our donations and our community engagement projects, as well as just their day-to-day commitment to being a professional, high-quality producer of construction materials. So thanks to them. They make my job easy. Additionally, that's got there. So, asphalt. Asphalt's essential. If you think about what really gets you upset during the winter, or an ice storm or a windstorm when you lose power, are the same things. When you start thinking about the essential construction materials of ready-mix concrete, hot mix asphalt, and aggregates. The real question is, how did you get here? You got here on a paved road. When you go home tonight, you're going to go to your house. You're going to be on a ready-mix concrete foundation, right? All starts with aggregates and leads through this. So, our industry is essential. National security. You look at the Eisenhower interstate system. It was built in the 50s, and it was built from a national security standpoint, and it lives that model to today. Think about the harbor and the ports. All of that rock came out of here, out of the quarry in Acushnet. Asphalt's essential to the economy, the vitality of the South Coast economy and beyond. We create high-paying career jobs, right? People send their kids off to college, they have a nice house, they do all of those things. These are high-quality, full-time jobs, career-paying jobs. The economic multiplier effect, when they say, the Lieutenant Governor spoke recently, and $1 billion of transportation investment equates to 13,000 paying jobs, and in states like Massachusetts and Rhode Island, those are union jobs, and those are high-paying quality jobs. A local source to construction materials keeps your taxes low. So since the shuttering of our facility, you can look in the surrounding towns, and their cost to continue to keep their infrastructure is up over 30%. So it's at some point it's economically not feasible to bring materials so far, particularly hot mix asphalt and ready mix concrete. They are perishable products. And every extra mile we drive with a truck loaded with aggregates is just increasing our carbon footprinting, putting more wear and tear on the roads, which ultimately then comes back to you, the taxpayers, at the local level, at your town level, but also at the state level, because it's costing more money to rebuild your infrastructure. So back to losing your power, you can't turn your lights on, you can't get water, real inconvenience. Start to think about if you commute through Rhode Island right now, the Washington Bridge is a real inconvenience. There's lots of different examples. Thankfully, nothing in Massachusetts at this point with a catastrophic loss of a bridge, but we see and read about those things every day in the news. We're an industrial zone, and we've been in business since the 1880s. Next. So we've invested more than $500,000 in best available control technology on the asphalt plant, and this goes back to 2022. We actually had Aztec, the manufacturer of the asphalt plant, here to meet with us and share best available control technology practices across the United States. So one of the places they brought insight to us was in downtown Los Angeles. There's a small asphalt plant that they work with and did enclosures in a blue smoke package. So, they came to the facility, we listened, and we began to, look at our asphalt plant to see how we could improve the existing technology. The asphalt plant in Acushnet is one of the newest, I think it is the newest asphalt plant in the state of Massachusetts. So it came with quite a bit of best available control technology, but we decided to kind of supersize that, right? So again, we met with the engineers, they gave us some feedback, we worked with them, they've actually taken what we're doing and sharing that with other manufacturers in the industry now. So we also evaluated, retained experts on odor complaints and a toxicologist. So I think, and we could go back to that, but all of that information was provided in 2022 to the board, and we can certainly provide it again.
Yeah, and I would just add, Derek, I think that's the significance of 2022. That's when we were before the Board of Health initially. So really a lot of what you're hearing about is in response and reaction to what we heard from residents and the board back in the summer of 2022, a couple of years ago.
So we'll go 23. So in 23, we improved the load-out area of the enclosure, and we did additional improvements to that this spring, enclosing the load-out area. And we also, looked at the inside the loadout area and outside. There's a set of horseshoe exhaust fans, and I think we've shared that to others. But we looked at that and we identified a need to change some of the dampers. So think about your wood stove and your flue. So we changed the dampers, we've changed the actuators. Kind of stepping into 24, Claudio and his team identified that the actuators, when we started the year, they were functioning, but not functioning as efficiently as possible. So they took it upon themselves to replace all the actuators. They're just, the air oxidized, whatever, so they were moving slower, or some of them were sticking. So we just made the choice to change that. So the actuators open the dampers as we're loading a load of hot mix into a truck, right? So improve the efficacy of the load out area, right? So it's drawing that up. So we did that. We use a product called EcoSword in HMA production. The other thing we're focusing on, really benefits a couple things. Warm mix asphalt. So warm mix asphalt is making hot mix asphalt down below 300 degrees at approximately 285. Conventionally, asphalt's been made all the way up into the 320 degree range. Obviously, the harder we make asphalt, the greater the potential for a burn-off of low volatiles, which is a petroleum-based product. So as we bring the temperature down, we decrease the burn. So that's been a benefit and a focus here on making sure that all the loads go out as warm mix asphalt. Claudio does a really good job of maintaining that, regardless of the customers telling them they want super fine and super hot. He just says, look, we're loading out of silo number 3, right? And that's what it is. And we stepped up creasing and enforcement of rules to ensure truck tarping. We've actually turned away several customers at the spring of this year because of our tarping policy. They came in with the wrong tarps, and we said, sorry, we can't load you, right? You have to go somewhere else. So that's kind of where we started. We started that effort last year and continued it again this spring when we opened. So again, still some other things. The other things we did here is we weren't using the asphalt tanks until late last year, but when we did, what happens is we load off and we pump off to the asphalt tank, and as the tank fills in the liquid, you can kind of think of the top of the tank, it burps. So what we put is a plumbing system here. You can see that with a variable frequency drive motor and an actuator. So as those tanks fill when we're pumping off, we're capturing any excess fume that's going to go out through the charcoal filters, and we're capturing that and bringing that down into our blue smoke package as well. So so we're trying to capture any potential point source of blue smoke, right? And blue smoke would be the odor component. So we also did that to the lab. We're required in our labs to do samples and burn-offs, so that was also a point source. So the team put a hood over that and captured that, and all of that goes into the blue smoke package to capture all of that. So that's kind of where we did. And we also retained Alliance last year to begin the analysis of odors in the neighborhoods and on our property, right? And I'll let Lou speak to the nasal ranger and what he does in his resume of work. So that started last year, and I believe we provided last year's report to the Board of Health. So again, continue to improve on the loadout areas. One of the things the team identified was, we have a set of silos, and so what we identified was last year we encapsulated the sides and the front. You can kind of see how that drops down to the height of the truck. They went through and added skirting on the sides to narrow that up, as well as they added skirting inside this silo between each of the silos. So when we're loading out of one, there's a set of skirts right there to slow, say, on a windier day, to capture that. So we're knocking that down and kind of keeping it inside the loadout area. We partnered with EcoSorb last fall. We gave them specific samples of the liquid we typically buy from the vendors in that market, and we worked with them on a product based on that liquid for us as a suppressant. So that's EcoSorb offers various products to the industry, but the one we asked and partnered with, and we're trying now, is a suppressant, asphalt suppressant. So it's attaching a molecule to that odor and dropping it down. So far, I think we're seeing positive results with that as well. So those are the big pieces so far. And then the only other thing on this would be, I mentioned the actuators. We replaced the actuators on the dampers for the source evacuation system. The other thing that the team did proactively on a Saturday was go in and change the pre-filters in the blue smoke package. So if you kind of think about your lawnmower and you mowed all season last year and now you're going to start mowing again this year, right thing to do is probably go and look at your air filter and clean that out. The baghouse for the blue smoke package is a series. So it has a series of pre-filters, much like, bigger in size, but much like you would have for your lawnmower, and then it has a series of bags behind it. And then it has a pan at the bottom which would catch the sludge, and then that sludge, when required, we ship that off to Clean Harbors. That's that. Did you want me to speak to this one?
Sure.
Yeah. Or you want to?
Sure. So this slide just provides some of the information that we had agreed to give to the board and to the residents during these monthly meetings. So we've captured here the days under which the plant was operating. We started the last day of April and then through the month of May. So you can see there listed out all the days, total of 22 days that the facility was in operation, basically the month of May and that last day of April. During that time, complaints were received through the portal on 7 different days. A couple of those days had more than one I think one day had 2 complaints, the 31st. One, the 9th, had 3 complaints. So 22 days operating, 7 days where complaints were received. I've noted the times on a couple of those complaints, only just to illustrate that they came in and were received after Keating had actually shut down for the day. So when we're talking about the procedures that Keating's employees typically follow, we couldn't follow it on those couple complaints because we'd already shut down for the day and the employees. But in terms of the procedures that Keating typically follows, and Derek can sort of flesh this out if I miss anything, but we've sort of summarized it here. PD gets notified when a complaint comes through the portal. An employee will try to contact the individual who has filed that complaint. There's been a couple times I'm aware where they'd go to voicemail and the mailbox would be full or something like that. But the vast majority of these times, it's my understanding, they were able to actually connect with and speak with the individual who filed the complaint. And then they go out and visit the area. And the reason for doing that, there's several reasons really for doing that, but the primary reason is trying to understand A, what's the source, B, what's the cause, C, what's the severity of the odor. And that's where Lou's going to chime in a little bit more later. A couple of the days here where complaints have been received, including May 9th, which was the day where we received the most complaints, Alliance was actually here and was able to go out in real time to investigate the complaints and actually quantify it with the types of measurements they do. So that's why you'll see that second bullet under the procedures. When Alliance is here, and they're here once a week, typically, they'll go out themselves, either in addition to or instead of a PJ Keating employee, and investigate those things in real time. And then finally, regardless, frankly, of whether complaints are being received or not, if Derek's here, he may do it himself. If he's not, it would be somebody else from the Keating team. Just proactively goes out a few times a day and drives the neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhoods, just to make sure there's nothing they smell that's problematic, to make sure that there aren't any issues or anything that they observe, either with their eyes or with their nose or otherwise. Just again, to be proactive and try to stay on top of it. So that's, again, sort of a generic description, just generally of what happens when a complaint's filed and received by the Keating.
I mean, Luke, the only other thing that you might want to comment on is that not every odor in town is PJ Keating's fault. And we've had several situations where their complaints have been put into the portal, but it was something else in the area. Right? So it's just important to recognize that.
What would that be?
Well, so one example I can give you right now.
No, he's made a statement. I want him to back it up.
Okay.
So, I live in this neighborhood. What is the alternative source that you're claiming right now?
Well, there was, I thought we were going to wait for questions till the end, but if the...
I'm going to allow it.
Okay, very good. So we'll pull it up. Want to know it, but odor, the complaint in the portal said I smell burning rubber and wire.
What was the alternative source?
Well, we don't know that. We're not if I may.
That's all. I just
Mr.
wanted to
Chairman,
make that
may I
clear.
finish?
I'm all set. Thank you.
I can actually tell you the date because I was in fact in court with Mr. Murray's colleague, Mr. Blake. May 8th, Keating's facility was not operating. And I got a report from Derek and a couple of Keating employees that day. We're not operating, but it stinks out here. We smell burning wire. It smells like maybe burning rubber. This is not us. If anybody complains, it's not us today. We're not even running the plant today. You'll see May 8th is not a day that they were actually operating. It does seem to be listed up there, even though it wasn't. So we're giving ourselves, I guess. Oh no, I'm sorry. We were operating. Maybe we just the plant wasn't
closed, right? There wasn't anyone on site. Is what you're saying?
No. That's not what we're saying.
They smell.
We got to keep
At any rate, my point is
Let me
simply
finish the presentation.
yeah, please. So at any rate, the point is to simply say, Keating employees did in fact smell odor on the 8th. It was not from our facility. I sort of told Jeff that day in court, hey, just FYI, complaints come in about this. We're smelling it.
I mean, I'll give you an
and that was the
example.
complaint that came in was about that smell. So that's, to answer your question, that's an example.
Another example was last year. there was a complaint received in the portal by a lady that was gardening on one of the streets on this side of the road. We went out, Mark Pillsbury, the vice president of asphalt, and myself went out there, and the neighbor, who was a mechanic for a construction company, was cutting up a pickup truck. And there was a fire based on when you start burning and cutting up, the tires got on fire, the antifreeze hose was on fire. We took pictures of that. As another example of odor coming out that is not a pleasant odor, but it was our fault. So, I mean, that's a second example of that situation. So not every odor is our fault in this town.
Well, we're not talking about the whole town, we're talking about this neighborhood.
We're gonna reserve the questions for later. I am curious though, you said you were open on the 8th, but not operating the plant? Is that what you're trying to say?
So I probably got myself a little turned around. I quite clearly did. As I understand it, the plant was not operating.
It was a rain day.
It was a rain day. So there were employees at the site, but the plant was.
So if employees were at the facility, even though the asphalt plant wasn't running, did you still follow up the complaint and find out where the odor was coming from?
The complaint was filed the next morning at 6:30 a.m. before heating had begun operating. But it was the same. It was a description of burning wire. It was the same
My
smell.
employees sent me an email on that day, as well as the other employees, saying, hey, we're getting nauseous on the facility. Just want you to know that there's an odor coming from an abutting property.
Nobody went out and looked.
We got video of it. I don't think it's appropriate for me to drop a dime on an abutter. We have the video of that.
So you did go and investigate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And then when the complaint did come in on the 9th, that was actually a day that Alliance was here. So all the procedures laid out here were followed when the complaint came in on the 9th.
You can proceed.
Thanks. So sort of continuing on that path and getting more specific with respect to specific complaints that came in and what was done. Heating shut down its plant on the 7th. There was a complaint received on the 6th, which was one of the ones mentioned on the prior slide where it came in after hours. So on the 7th, heating took a look to see what might have been an issue, identified a malfunctioning component, replaced it. On the 9th, which was a day that
So did the odor on the 6th, the night of the 6th, was it caused by the malfunctioning components? And that's why the next day you shut down?
that I don't know the answer.
No, I think it gave us a second set of eyes. So I was at the facility and I went with Claudio and Mark and we said, hey, let's just take a look. And we were looking at it and we said it doesn't look like the efficacy on some of our source extractors are working as well as they should be. And then that's when they identified the actuators sticking. And then so from that, we then replaced all, as we just said, let's replace all the actuators because we don't know which ones are necessarily functioning all the time. And we pretty much could see that over the winter there was some corrosion and rust on them. So Claudio took the lead of replacing all of those actuator. They're just a little tiny thing to open those dampers to make sure our efficacy of source evacuation is optimal.
Okay, so my follow-up question. Is it possible, and this is probably a dumb question, but is it possible for the plant to be shut down and there to be a malfunction and for there to be some sort of odor emitted from the malfunction?
If I could just...
Oh, yeah.
The complaint as filed, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't have it right in front of me, it was filed after hours, but it wasn't saying, I smell this right now. It smelled this afternoon or something along those lines. So the complaint wasn't saying, hey, it stinks now at 5:20 or whatever time it was filed. It was, I believe, kind of, that's just when they happened to file.
So based on the complaint, you tried to analyze is everything functioning properly, and you found no. So we're going to shut it down.
Well, no, yeah, so when I came in and I saw Claudio and we chatted, I said, let's just take a look, as we were loading some trucks out, and we said it doesn't look like the efficacy, it was still working, but not working to the extent that the improvements should have had it working, and so the decision was to replace the actuators.
Could they have been malfunctioning the day before when the complaint actually smelled it?
It could have been, might have been more a function of wind direction, again, you know, it could have been a couple of those pieces, but we did take the approach to replace them all. Because of what we saw in the one that was sticking, and that was Claudio. He pretty much said, hey, this one's rusted and sticking. My guess is, you know, these aren't really designed to be, you know, out in the elements like they are. So they just made the decision to replace them. And a couple ones that are hard to reach, they actually extended them down so they're much easier for the team to look at and evaluate and replace if necessary in the future.
How often do you replace them?
I mean,
Is it just
we're kind
you
of
wait until they're broken? Or
yeah. There's not really
or-
you know, they don't give us like a preventive maintenance plan around it, saying, hey, after X hours, or that's not what it is. So we're kind of learning. I think
Okay.
right now from Claudio with the team, we'd probably sit here and say, going forward, we would replace those at startup in the spring because they're exposed to the elements over the winter and so forth. So I think that's, from our learnings, that would be something I think we put in a playbook to say, you know, let's just go ahead and replace those until they build a better mousetrap.
Okay, so moving on to the 9th, as I may have started to mention, that was in fact a day that Alliance was on site. So Lou, in a short while here, has got a table that's going to sort of lay out the days that they've been on site and what they found. So I'll defer to that. But suffice it to say, that was a day that Alliance was here, in real time, went out to investigate the complaints. Also, same day, Heating made the decision to increase the percentage of warm mix asphalt. Derek described earlier the difference between warm mix asphalt and hot mix asphalt as a way to try to just reduce the emissions a little bit. There was a complaint that came in on the 17th of May, if I'm not mistaken. That was again the other one that was maybe after hours, but regardless, on the 18th, Heating replaced the pre-filters in the blue smoke baghouse. And then again on the 31st, end of last week, another day where Alliance was on site and able to investigate. And as Derek mentioned earlier, there have been at least 3 instances so far in the past month where Heating has refused to load out trucks because they have not arrived with proper tarping. So that's another way. A couple of the complaints that have come in have been related to trucks, so that's just, again, another illustration of specifically an action taken. And this, at this point, is now for Alliance. So I'm going to hand it off to Lou Rose, and he's just going to take a spin through what he and Alliance have been doing for Heating.
Good evening. My name is Lou Rose. I'll tell you a little bit about our company, a little bit about myself, and our involvement here recently with PJ Heating. Alliance has been around for over 30 years. At this point, we've been doing some growth the last few years. We've got over 1,300 employees in over 40 offices across North America. Our service lines include a lot of environmental work, specifically air testing. We do stack testing, we do LDAR, which is leak detection and repair. We've got software companies now that are part of Alliance, so we can design software. We've got continuous emissions monitoring systems, SIMS, services, analytical laboratory, environmental consulting, and ambient air monitoring. And that's where I come in. Again, I'm Lou. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from SUNY ESF in Syracuse, New York. I'm actually born and raised in Worcester, Massachusetts. After going to school up in Syracuse, I stuck around. Married, I've got 2 boys, ages 3 and 6, love the outdoors. Just a little bit about myself. So I'm a project manager at Alliance. I've been in the industry for over 14 years, and My focus has been in ambient air quality. That's related to fence line monitoring programs, remediation sites, odor investigations, air sampling. We design air monitoring systems and software that go with it so that customers can view data in real time, depending on what the facility and the constituents are, and depending on if there's any project criteria or local ordinances or anything like that. So within ambient air quality, one of our service lines is odor, and some of this information is just a little bit of a background on what we can do, what we provide, and then I'll get into what we've done here with PJ Keating. So there are odor observations. This could be up close to a source or at the fence line, property boundary, or just somewhere in an ambient location. There are different ways to measure odors and describe odors. There are qualitative descriptors. This odor is strong, it's here all the time, it smells like this. There are other methods that you can use to quantitatively measure odors. These would be through the use of a field olfactometer or grabbing an air sample and sending it off to a laboratory where a panel of folks would sit down and sample that air and smell that air as well. So an olfactometer, just to explain the principle there, in the field, we're able to use this device. It's pictured in the top right and the bottom right. This is taking ambient air and passing it through different size orifices, which are determining dilutions, and there are carbon filters. And in essence, the more times you dilute an odor, or you dilute that ambient air, if you can still smell that odor, the stronger the odor. And each one of these orifice sizes is associated with a number, a dilution to threshold number. So the threshold that's the point where you can smell it. So the typical practice is you start at the highest reading that you can, and you work your way down until you first smell that odor. And there's procedures in the field to go back and forth between high level, low level, until you get the first point where you smell that odor. And that's our way to quantify an odor. Just putting a number on it. Odors are very subjective. It's a touchy subject, and that's why anybody who's on the odor panel or a field observer is pre-screened for odor sensitivity and olfactory sense. We want somebody who's at least an average olfactory sense. There are people who can hardly smell at all, and there are people who are hypersensitive. And we try to have folks that are doing our observations somewhere right in that happy medium. You can go back to that one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. So there are evaluations, and there's also mitigation techniques that can be implemented when it comes to odors. When we're talking about evaluations, some of the things that we can do are we can come in and rank odor sources based on those odor levels, dilution to threshold. And potentially emission rates, depending on what the source is, where you can measure airflow. You can create models, showing if you have a certain strength odor at a source and the winds are in such a direction at such a strength, you can kind of predict what potential odors might be further downwind. Mitigation techniques include process modifications, such as changing ingredients or production rates. There can also be capture and control devices, scrubbers, capture hoods, physical barriers such as polytarp spray covers. The spray covers we see a lot on remediation sites. You've got some sort of impacted soil that is in a stockpile. It's not going to be moved or relocated off-site for a while. They either cover that with a poly sheeting, a tarp, or some sort of foam or temporary concrete, and create a shell over that odor source. There are other options, odor neutralizers and additives, misting systems, and one of the things that we do is we do bench and field testing to evaluate the effectiveness of some of those control technologies. So personally, I got involved with PJ Keating and Alliance last year. Towards the end of the summer, we came in on an initial site visit, and we took a look at all the various odor sources on site, and we kind of identified primary potential sources. And then we got the rundown with the PJ Keating folks of the process and the various components along that process. And then we performed, during that visit and then also 4 subsequent visits, some odor surveys where we typically start at the facility. We're measuring around those odor sources. We want to know, are there odor sources here on site today? Can we smell them? We get readings. We're looking at the winds. Wind direction is always pretty critical in these situations. So on-site or local meteorological station, a weather station for wind speed and wind direction is pretty critical. And we try to target these observations when conditions are light winds in a consistent direction. And we're targeting varying wind directions so that we can gather data in different downwind sectors. And those conditions, the light winds, consistent direction, those usually make for what I would consider worst case odor scenarios, right? The most odor lingering in an area. The more windy it is, the more dispersion. So we had found during those 5 visits last year, and then we've also done 4 so far this year, as PJ Keating has mentioned, during the month of May, and we're coming out once a week. And typically what we've seen is when the facility is operating, we've seen some odors in close and around the various sources, and then we head out to the property boundary, and if we detect odors there, they've typically been pretty low. And then we move out to the community. We're focusing, we do go upwind as well, but we're focusing our efforts downwind where those potential odors might be traveling. When we go out, we're documenting anything we find that could be related to the facility, and also anything else that we're smelling that might not be facility related. That doesn't necessarily mean it smells good or bad. It could be roses, or somebody sealed the driveway, lawn mowing. You know, all those things are quantifiable with an odor strength, and we can tag along a characteristic with that, but we're not the ones that decide that smells good or bad. That's, you know, subjective to the individual. One of the things that we did find, the few times that we did detect odors within the community downwind, is that we could smell them with our, we call it the naked nose, but once we started using the nasal ranger to try to quantify those odors, even getting all the way down to the lowest dilution, which is a 2, we were not able to detect those odors. So we call that a less than 2. We're not saying there's no odor, right? We can smell it, but when we try to quantify that odor, we can't quantify it on the nasal ranger. So there is an odor there, and we discern that in our notes as calling it less than 2, because we know it's not a 2, but there is some sort of odor there.
Hey Lou, it might be helpful for the board just to explain, you know, like the scale, essentially. You know, so you're saying less than 2, maybe to just put that in context.
Sure, and I think some of that information is probably in the report that we submitted to you guys last year, where up close to the sources, you know, within a few feet, for example, we can measure things over 100 DT, dilution to threshold, and then as that's backing out towards the property boundary, we're down at 4, a 2, less than a 2. Okay, so this is a table from observations where we were out this year in the month of May, the 4 weeks that we were out there for observations. And these are just some of the notes that we have in doing our surveys, where we keep track of when we were there, some facility operational conditions. Was the plant up and running? And for us, in the potential odor sources, that doesn't just mean are they loading trucks out? Are they also mixing asphalt, all the processes are running maximum potential odor emission sources. And then as we're heading out towards the property boundary, you can see in the 5th column there, some of the highest odor readings that we detected closest to the property boundary. So some of those are inland a little bit, depending on the wind direction. Looking at the 22nd specifically. And then also the maximum odor that we detected downwind in the community on those days. So you can see we did detect odors down in the community, but they were not quantifiable on the nasal ranger on those days, at those times. And then there's just some operational conditions there. We're typically looking at which fill line is being used, are the trucks being loaded on the north end or the south end? Is the plume from the bag house, is that visible? We know everything's up and running. Those are just, add to our documentation.
So on May 9th, you were at the facility from 7:43 to 9:52? And that was it for the...
That includes being out at the community as well. Yeah, we're typically a couple hours.
So describe to me at 7:43 how time, where you are in the time, not just sitting in a truck, with nose plugs, from...
Right, so these,
hours,
we haven't reported this data yet. The data that we've reported previously, we include our field forms, which give a breakdown of every
But
location
just
we're at and
in
when.
general, just give me a concept of...
Typically,
All right, at 7:43, you're on site. At 7:53, you're over at the other corner of the site. What do you do? I'm
it's
trying to understand.
typically up to an hour, typically a little under an hour on site. Right, again, we're confirming that the potential sources are active.
So you're walking around the perimeter?
We're walking.
Is there a pattern?
We're
or
walking
is there
right
a-
up to truck. It's all wind dependent. So
Okay.
we're focusing downwind. We do go upwind of the sources and also of the site.
So wherever the
But
downwind is, that's what you're
Our efforts are
moving
focused
around trying
downwind.
to... Okay.
Yep, that's correct. So we could be within 50 feet of a truck being loaded. We could be walking around the outside of the quarry. We're typically towards the front of the property, but if there's a westerly wind, the winds are blowing out over the quarry at quite a distance. So we, depending on the wind direction, we'll try to mimic distances. If the winds are such that downwind receptor off-site is not in line, then we can mimic those distances at least and say, okay, well, at 200 feet away from a source, even though the wind's not blowing in a direction that's favorable to potentially get some off-site odors, we can mimic that distance and say, okay, well, at this distance, here's what we're getting. So when the other thing that we provide as part of our write-up in our documentation is a map showing each point where we've detected an odor, if it was site-related or not. And then that goes along with our form, which shows the time that we were there, the quantifiable measurement, if we were able to get one, a descriptor, and a frequency. So the other thing is frequency. Our typical descriptors there are fleeting, intermittent, and persistent. So you think you smelled something and it's gone, that's a fleeting odor. Intermittent, it's kind of coming and going, maybe the wind's wafting, and then persistent odor is, it's just smells, you're there, it smells.
Simple question, does Alliance monitor other facilities similar to PJ Keating in this state?
For odors,
Yes.
we have one right now in New York. Not aware of another one in Massachusetts right now. But for example, in New York, there's that particular town, there's a town ordinance, and we collect data and just, again, it's objective data, just showing whether there were odors from the facility or not, if there's other odors out there in the community, and then they do what they do with that data.
Would that New York facility have the same wind patterns as we have around here?
Probably slightly different. I mean, in general, right, we're in the Northeast, most of the winds are going to be westerly, but there are local, there's, how many there? 2 meteorological stations
On site.
that we're collecting data from right on site locally from PJ Keating. So it's, as opposed to going to the local airport or something like that. So we're monitoring the winds right on the site. When we're describing and we're doing this upwind, downwind, obviously the conditions that we're observing at that time, but we're also looking at real-time data.
I think I'd like to allow the audience one question at a time. I think you can just stand and speak if you want.
Douglas Thomas, obviously a Acushnet neighbor. Is there a particular reason why these tests are conducted at 7 and 7:30 in the morning instead of the peak of the day, which is around, typically the height of business is around noontime? Has a study been done, say at noontime versus 7, 7:30 in the morning, when people are actually getting going in those businesses?
Okay, yeah, I mean, our direction initially was a lot of complaints were coming in earlier in the morning when folks were getting their day started, starting their commute or getting the kids on the bus or whatever the case may be. That's also tends to be the more favorable meteorological conditions. Those are real still, low wind speed conditions. As the day goes on, typically as the sun's coming up, the wind speeds will increase, and that's causing more dispersion. And typically when there's higher wind speeds and more dispersion, it's harder to quantify odors.
And if I could just comment on that, just to the production side, our highest productivity, because we're limited right now, is when we start producing. We're producing at the highest rate right away because there's a bigger demand to get those first rounds of trucks out into to the different jobs that are out there. So peak production starts right at 7 o'clock and runs through, and that's the highest intensity. It doesn't mean that it won't stay like that to a certain point, like doing 3,000 tons in a day or something like that. But those first few hours, we're optimizing that plant to load those silos.
And just for example, one of the facilities in New York, they requested, because most of the complaints have come in the evening hours, so we're typically there for a couple hours in the evening.
So something else I would like to add, this New York site compared to the Acushnet site, keep in mind, they're only running at a small percentage, at roughly 30%. Don't hold me to that. So these numbers are going to be way out of line if you are going to do a mathematical calculation on production.
Well, it'll be based on emission rates, and we haven't pulled samples for constituents and calculated any emission rates, but that would be based on emission rates and a model is how you would calculate that.
The more you produce, the more emissions and other carbon footprints that you're going to give off, because you're only running out of percentage. And I'm no mathematician or any other, scientific engineer. Like I say, they're only running out of percentage. So I just think mathematically these numbers, they're obviously going to go higher. I just think that should be something that should be looked at, is all I'm saying.
What is the percentage you're running at?
I'm not sure. I just wanted to chime in, and Derek may be better equipped to answer this. But I mean, it's my understanding that what was just suggested is really not the case in terms of odor. That I don't know that the number 30 is the correct number, but let's just say it is. If they're operating at say 30% capacity, the odors are the odors. So that if they go up to 80% capacity, that doesn't mean that the odors are going to be now 50% worse or that. There's not that correlation. That's my understanding. No, I mean, I'm very serious. I don't believe that correlation exists, but I don't know if you have anything to add, Derek. But
I just would like you to provide the documentation to substantiate your claim, and then we'll be happy to provide documentation from the manufacturers, but you're wrong. So please provide the documentation that substantiates your claim. We'll come back and provide information from the manufacturers, but actually stopping the plant is probably a time where we would have greater odor and what we try to do is we try to step the plant up and then run it consistently. So whether it runs at 200 tons per hour, 300 tons per hour, or 400 tons per hour, the goal is to run the plant consistently so the burn is clean. So if you think about starting and stopping your propane stove or any of those devices, your car, it's very similar over there, and we'll be happy to come back and present that information to the board.
Right, but are we willing to roll the dice on this? Show us a comparison to another operating facility that's manufacturing 100% to show this public what we're looking at. This is all hogwash, these numbers. They're running at 30%.
So what is the amount being produced right now, Derek? Let's be upfront.
Mr. Chair, may I just...
What is being
the
produced?
questions be directed at least
Yes.
for you, Mr. Chair?
Please, just direct the question through me and we'll get the question out.
I have a question.
What is your question?
Again, what is the current rate of production? Let's stop beating around the bush, Derek.
Yeah.
Are you making 300 tons an hour? Are you making 500 tons an hour? Are you making 5,000 tons a day? Do you not want to tell us? I mean, because you have issues already, and the production is at what amount?
I think,
And we're already pretty dissatisfied. I think, the amount of people that are here that are
I think it's a fair
being
question.
affected.
I think it's a fair question to ask. What is roundabout your average tonnage per hour and what is your ultimate goal? I think it's fair to ask.
Well, I'd be happy to provide the information. I'm not going to sit here and throw out some numbers, but whether, and I think it's important to understand our process, right? So we're not going to run at 400 tons per hour from 7 to 5 if we don't have customer demand. We're not like a factory where we're making fenders for a Ford pickup truck and we just can continue to make them. We make a perishable product, so we don't just come in. And so tomorrow, like Friday before Memorial Day, the demand for hot mix asphalt is significantly different than the demand on maybe a Tuesday if it hasn't rained. So we get rain, our demand is different, so our tons per hour is different, the amount we sell is different. So every day, we don't come in and say we're going to run 400 tons per hour for 8 hours because we may not have the demand for the product, right? So we have a schedule and we try to meet that schedule, plus use a little bit of factoring to allow for additional on-call customers. But we don't make hot mix asphalt and maximize it every day. And some days we could be 10% of our rated capacity. And you got to remember that our rated capacity right now is only 7 to 5, right? So let's just say we're 400 tons per hour, right? So in a 7 to 5, we could make 4,000 tons in a day. We've had several days so far this year that we're over 2,000 tons. We have several days where we've had complaints and we may have only put up 300 tons because of weather. So it's just not it's not, we're not making a car part, so the factory doesn't start, and it's not like making Titleist golf balls. If the factory starts at 7 and everyone goes to work, the production line goes, right? We don't go that way.
Let me rephrase the question from me then. You're allowed so much tonnage per year, correct? There's a
Our
max-
air permit, our air permit is specific to hours of operation and tons per year.
Like historically, the town is only allowed so much per year, right?
I'm not sure I follow.
Or is that related to the rock? The asphalt is, all right, so let's say based on what you just said, what would be the tonnage if you were doing the maximum allowable per hour? I understand where the audience is going, and that's why I'm just, right now, is it so that we're running at 30% so everything isn't so bad and then things ramp up, and that's a concern?
Again,
Where have you gotten to at this point? What is the amount that you've produced? What is the largest amount that you've, I think that's the word.
Get an average.
What is an average largest amount that you've produced at this point?
Well, I just explained to you that, we've had days in excess of 2,000 tons, And we've also had days where we haven't
But
done
in excess of 2,000 tons. So
like
where-
2,300 tons in a day.
Okay, that's,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's what they want to know.
Yeah.
And what could you do?
That's what I want to know.
In a 10-hour working window with the restrictions that you placed on us, at 400 tons per hour, that would be 4,000 tons.
What do you allow under your permit?
Our permit, we did in the past, we've done over 800,000. I think the highest year was 880,000 tons. I just have to, I don't have my permit in front of me, but
It's like 1.2 million.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, another quick question for Alliance. Is that data, is that included in your data? What's the amounts being produced when you collect your data? That's something I'd like to know.
That's not data that I
Right,
have.
so you're not even privy to that data.
We're looking at what the operational conditions are, where they're
Right,
running
but
that.
you're not logging and quantifying what's being produced in your data as you collect it.
No.
Amounts being produced, no.
Nope.
So just so you know, like right now through year-to-date, asphalt tons through the plant basically are 29,161 tons. Most of that was in the month of May. I mean, so again, you know, we're a seasonal business. We're very much like a farm, right?
But if all of a sudden Maura Healy decides to give you every contract in the state, how much could you put out?
Well, I mean, our operating hours on the plant are clear. So, you know, I think we could do, I'll provide that information to you next month. I'll show it to you. You have a copy of our air permit and our operating hours that were included in the air permit, which was also open public comment. So, you know, we can put that together, and I'd prefer just to put that in the table and give it to you. I'm not prepared right now to just wing a number at you and then someone throw it back at me, if that's okay. I didn't know we were going to talk about the air permit tonight, so.
Fair enough? Yes, sir.
Kevin Smith. One question I have for you is 7 to 9, it's for you. 7 to 9, is that plant at full operating temperature, the whole plant? As if it was, you would run a full day's production?
Claudio, I mean, the plant, Claudio, the plant, we get the temperature on that plant tuned right up.
I am the operator, so I do everything, try to help everybody. So what I do, when I start my plant, I have to raise the heat and then lower the heat and it stays steady. We do have graphs that the line is straight. What that means the line is straight, when they ask me for 290, that line is straight. We have graphs. So there is days that's rain, so you struggle with the heat, so you want to maintain. But once the plant is nice and steady, it stays steady.
It doesn't.
So it's not it's not something that you run high, run low. You want to, when I make mix, try to make as much as I can, shut the plant down, so like that we don't have no problems.
That's a consistency.
That's consistency. So like that, we don't throw away no mix, we don't throw away no foul, no orders, and that's the way we do. We make as much as we can just to do our jobs, make a little bit for the next day, and we shut the plant down.
So when Claudio fires the plant up in the morning, 7 o'clock, that burner and the temperature of that plant is up 10 to 15 minutes later. He's at high heat, and then that, like he said, it's all about consistency. So he fires the plant up without material running through it. He gets that plant temperature up, gets everything hot, the baghouse warms up, right? Everything's clean. Then he brings it back down, and the goal is to maintain a steady, kind of like fuel efficiency in a car. Right. We want to run it nice and steady, and Claudio does a great job of managing that and managing fuel burn and then temperature of the hot mix being produced in that 280, 290 range. And the other component that's really a big factor in our industry is moisture. So when we get these 3 or 4 inch gully washers like we got the other day with the thunderstorms that rolled through, moisture has an adverse impact on making hot mix because it just means longer drying time, it's less efficient because we need to dry that aggregate because if we don't dry the aggregate, then there's no absorption of the liquid asphalt, right? So he'll turn it down. So on a rainy day or when he's seeing optimum moistures in excess of, say, 6, 7, 8%, he's turning, our tons per hour actually drops. We kind of use, as a rule of thumb, we're going to reduce the potential capacity of production by 15% for every inch of rain, right? So if we think we can run at 300 tons per hour steady, but we get an inch of rain overnight, he really is going to be down around 280, something like that, and that's going to be what he can consistently produce hot mix out at, and we can load our silos and then load it out.
That's where I was kind of going.
Yep.
Because if you start out at 7:43 and your plant is cold, and
Yep.
then you go into your 2-hour window, where is the,
Yep.
where is the plant at that? So
Yep.
it doesn't, you're telling me it doesn't take that long
No,
to
it
get the
doesn't.
full.
And actually the biggest environmental factor is weather, right? So Wayne, we had a fair amount of rain in May, so he's running the plant at a slower level because it takes longer to dry the material. And if we push the plant to do more, we just have a quality issue, and we're gonna have a product of poor quality. Thank you, Claudia.
I would just one thing to add too that I think might go to some of the questions that have just been asked here. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. We could certainly provide them if the board wants. But May 22nd, which was one of the days that Alliance was on site, did happen to be one of the highest days of production and sales that heating has had in this past month. And as you can see, the odors as measured by Alliance were extremely low that day. There were no complaints received at all that day. It just goes back to my point earlier that amount of production, amount of sales doesn't necessarily correlate to odor issues.
It isn't.
That's,
Yeah,
weather does.
Yeah.
Of course, it could.
Of course it was. I have a follow-up question. The 15 is not a good odor because it's not less than 2 by far.
But that goes, so the 15.
And that's at the property line, and we have houses near the property line.
That's, I should have probably provided a map. It was as far as we could get towards the property line, so I believe the winds that day, this would have been more towards the north, so we were up around the concrete plant. Yep. So for access and safety, we went as far as we could, and then we went into the community after that.
Can you bring your rock climbing gear?
And I'm really just talking about once you're out into the community.
Dave?
Yes.
On May 9th, from 10:38 to 11:38, 17 asphalt trucks went that way, and 19 went that way full, in an hour.
I'm not sure what that means quantitatively.
But that's,
I have no idea. Honestly, I don't have any idea when they say
even with
tons per hour.
traffic,
I don't know what that
even
means
with
for trucks.
traffic,
Do we know what, like, if,
36 trucks in an hour.
is that
Not to
normal?
mention the rest of the traffic.
Is 36 trucks an hour normal?
I mean, we certainly can avoid that.
And that's just south. I don't know about north.
36, Tom is going to say 36 times 23 would be 888, 28 tons, so that would be normal to less than normal. I mean, again, going back to what we're permitted to do and what we've done historically there, that's not an unreasonable amount of truck traffic leaving the facility.
And that's at 30%.
Yeah, right.
I don't know where you're getting that number, sir, but again, if you want to provide the documentation that shows that the plant is running at 30%, that's what the
Mr. Hill,
manufacturer...
those were your words, I believe, that you quoted.
I didn't say 30%. I said that we've had several days over 2,000 tons, right? And I said that in a 10-hour operating window at 400 tons per hour, that's 4,000 tons.
Okay, let's just keep, I'm bad at this, but let's keep the questions flowing through me to keep it simple. And are there any other questions before they move on? Yes?
Aaron Pinard. I have a question talking about water, environment, moisture. We are on a river. There is constant. We're on a peninsula. We are surrounded by water. We have 5 watersheds connected to this sole community. There are 5 of us, all connected. That is every day, all day long nature providing water and water and water. We're not talking rain, we're talking moisture in the air, moisture in the soil. So it is affecting your plant. So you could have a day where you're not operating, but there are things going on in the environment that are, you have piles of silt, and you brag about recycling. You have materials just sitting there rotting in the hot sun with the moisture, which absorbs these odors, and then we have the wind that carries things. You can go on and on, that we're not running today. That was a neighbor burning a truck, I have video, etc. The point is, you have so many violations and so many factors going on at that plant that are causing odors other than you operating. So you need to accept that responsibility. You need to cap things off as you should, so that the elements don't carry these odors and the dust throughout the town. And this is what I've been saying forever. It's like you can't just say, oh, it rained today, so that's why you smelled something. We're surrounded by water. It's nature. We're surrounded by water. There's no way that that environment is not affecting your plant and causing us a problem. So you need to protect us against those factors. So that's what I have come here to ask you to do.
I would say in response to that, Mr. Chair, that the Alliance report that was produced from the data gathered last year, which has been provided to the town, so it's a publicly available document, and Lou, correct me if I'm wrong, but does identify the various sources, odor sources, that have been looked at. And I would anticipate that ultimately the data gathered for this year would be in a report that's going to reflect the same thing. So just responding to at least a piece of your comment there about sort of multiple sources, that is something that's factored in.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I think ultimately what the town needs to decide is how much exposure are these residents going to be, on a daily basis? How many hours of it are we going to have to endure day after day after day? It's how long have we been kicking this can down the road? Nothing has changed. We filed a complaint on Friday. I don't just frivolously file a complaint, but when I can't sit on the deck and have a cup of coffee because I got to eat your crap, I have a problem. And it isn't going to stop, and I'm not going to stop. When I have to close the windows in the house because it stinks that bad. I mean, how much of that are we going to have to endure? How long are we going to kick this can down the road? And it goes for the other boards in town as well. How many hours a day do we have to endure this? You think we have nothing better to do, this group? You think this group has nothing better to do than sit here and try to fight for our lives? This is our homes. I'm not an asphalt plant. You can put all the lipstick on a pig, man. It's still a pig. Jeez, this is ridiculous.
Yes.
Linda.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Linda, go ahead.
One at a time, you both get to speak.
Two things. You were talking about less than 2%, where you could still smell it. Is that considered to be acceptable?
Oh, well, it's not a percentage, it's dilution.
Well, whatever your
I'm just
scale
quantifying
is.
it.
Yeah, you're quantifying it, but you're saying it's non-detectable, where you can smell it.
It would be described as a barely perceptible odor at a less than 2.
So, that's supposedly considered to be acceptable?
I can't speak to whether
Well,
it's acceptable.
I'm just saying that just because it doesn't
Right there.
register on the scale, doesn't mean that it's not acceptable.
I tend to agree with you that I found it odd that he said it smells, but then you put this thing on you and it doesn't register. To me, it doesn't matter. If it smells, it smells.
If a human being can smell it.
That's
it's a
correct.
problem.
I'm over here. To me, I mean, I wouldn't want to smell it.
If I may, back in August,
Right? Didn't you have a second?
whenever it was, back in summer of 2022 when we were before the board, the assistant health agent was using this exact same scale and methodology to argue and establish to the board's satisfaction that these were nuisance odor conditions. That is what the quantification was intended to do, to put a number to it, because as Lou said earlier, odor is really subjective. And this is a way to quantify it, to put a number on it, to understand objectively. How bad is it really? Some people smell it, some people maybe have a terrible sense of smell, don't smell it at all. This is a way to just give us objective data, put a number to it.
I would determine 2. Maybe 2 should be 0.
Well, 2 is, so these are either below 2
Or
or
0.5. I mean,
Well, it's, yeah, just to explain, so we don't know, right? We are smelling something. It's not registering at a 2, which is the lowest detection on the device. So that's why we call it less than 2. We're not saying it's a non-detect.
can you turn the device and make it so that
The lowest orifice is a 2.
that'll make one less?
No.
Okay.
2 is an odor. 2 is the odor that we smell. That's the problem. That's the issue. I can smell it. I go up and down the street all the time. It's bad.
The other
I mean, I
part,
can't disagree with these neighbors.
But you smell a trash truck.
Yeah, but I smell it. When you were, excuse me, when you were.
10 hours a day?
Hold on,
Would you be
before,
courtesy and let
you
other
weren't
people speak,
operating,
please?
there was no odor. So that's my point.
Go
So there was
ahead
no
and take your
odor when
turn.
you weren't operating, and now you're operating, and that's why we're doing this, and that's why we're here.
Take-
So there's definitely, there's an issue, there's an odor. I smell it. I mean, yeah, you smell the trash truck, you smell everything. But you didn't smell asphalt until you opened it, and now we smell it. So,
I mean, when I look at the reports that were submitted going back to last fall, and this is only from a snapshot in time that they were there. You know, when you read, when you go through the numbers, 460, 115, not determined, not sure what that means. 7, 100, 4, 2, 7. There's almost no times that there's no odor. Unless that's what not determined is. And not determined means
ND is
zero,
non-detect. Yeah, you can't even smell it.
non-detected, and
Just
that's
as an
here,
individual.
not your machine?
Correct, you call it
Okay.
the raw or naked.
Then you go to the next page, you got 4, 4, 2, less than 2, but that still smells. 4, 7, 2. You know, the list shows a lot of odors. The next one, 60, 7, 15, 100, 100, 7, 4, 2. Less than 2, but that's still an odor. 4. And we had 3 non-determinants on that list. The
We are
next
zoned
one-
as an industrial site.
On my house.
I mean, the list, I don't know if this list is supposed to be impressive, but 7, 4, less than 2, that's an odor, less than 2, that's an odor. 15, not determined, less than 2, not determined, less than 2, 2, 2. And the list goes on and on. I mean, there were a couple of good days, I guess. The next one, 30,
Well, each of those
100, 30, 30.
Just to
Less than 2,
clarify,
less than
each
2,
of
less
the
than 2,
locations
2.
is tied to a location. Right, so some of those readings were taken on-site and some of those were at property boundary or off-site.
All I'm looking at is a list. I don't see the difference unless I gotta spend hours studying the map and looking at it. To me, what's important is at all these home sites.
Yeah, and that's, this column there, right? I mean, I understand precisely what you're saying, and from our perspective, I think we tend to look at it the same way. It's not what's the smell on Keating's property at the facility. It's what's...
Once you get to the property boundaries, you want 0.
Yeah, on the property. And I think what these numbers are showing are, I understand your point that less than 2 is, you could smell something, but in terms of this board's consideration of, is this a nuisance? That number tells us that the answer is no.
I'm gonna tell you quite frankly, I don't think anybody should have to smell anything. When I look at the map and I look at where you're detecting, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to take that plant, move it all the way to the back, and then I don't see any houses around.
Mine.
I mean, we talked about that 4 years ago, didn't we?
Mine.
It's quite obvious to me what needs to happen, but we keep going through this, but I don't, and you guys need to get it down to 0.
move the plant to the back, get it over with. Gotta happen.
I have one other issue.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The hours of operation, if I'm understanding, are like early in the morning till whatever. But at 2 o'clock Monday morning, I had to shut my windows It was hanging in the air, there was no wind that day, but it was hanging in the air. It smelled so bad, you could hear it running. What's it doing at 2 o'clock in the morning running? I want to know that.
Do you know what day that was?
Oh, huh? Yeah, it was Monday morning, this past Monday, the 3rd, right?
1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a holiday. It
Yep.
just came
Yeah,
falling
it came,
above.
I had to shut the window, it was making me sick.
1:30 a.m. We're not operational.
You can hear the machines
Running in the distance. It's a lot operating.
If we could, Mr. Chairman.
Rob Robinson, VP of Aggregates for Keating, PJ Keating. There was nothing running on that day, and I actually checked our cameras. We have cameras around that site just to make sure there was nobody on site. So in answer to that question, that's it.
It was a paid holiday for the employees. They all got 3 days off. We left the facility probably 3 or no later than 4 o'clock on Friday, and they didn't return till Tuesday morning. So, other than
Tuesday morning?
Mrs. Scott?
Linda Snapchat.
Into Monday.
I am Ashley, my house is the closest.
No,
To the-
just the other
to the-
Please, she has
Oh,
the floor.
Tuesday, I'm sorry.
My house
Monday
is
into
the closest.
Tuesday.
What is
I'm
the
sorry,
Tuesday?
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Okay. My house is the closest to Warren, okay? I've lived here for 33 years, and I'm telling you, the smell is awful. I cannot open my windows. I've had to shut them. I've tried to sleep, like she said, with the windows open, and you can smell it throughout the night. Whether they're closed, open, or whatever, I can still smell it, whether they're open or not.
Are there stored materials that would emit odors in the middle of the night, overnight?
Of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's liquid asphalt, there's diesel on site, but again, the system should capture that, and if we're not loading the tanks, right, we're not pushing anything out, so we keep temperature on the liquid, but we're not changing there's not a significant change in temperature in the asphalt tank, because we're not bringing in new product, it's just so over a weekend, it's circulating, but be de minimis.
So,
If the
so there
temperature,
is, so it's possible that there's odors coming through at nighttime. People have their windows open because it's beautiful out like tonight. It's possible that there's odors coming out of the plant that you can smell through your window. Is that what I'm hearing?
The complaint, I think, from at least the most recent one I saw, was the smell of burning rubber, which would not be heating.
No, there's a resident testifying here that more than one, they can smell odors at nighttime with their windows open. I would call that a valid complaint now in front of you that I'm hearing, not everybody knows how to, I wouldn't know how to put a complaint through a portal. You know, not everybody is savvy like that, and some people don't want the attention and don't want to put their complaints in. You know, I mean, people don't want to be bothered, they don't want any bullseye on their back, you know, so they don't.
To be honest with you, yes, my husband will not come because he doesn't want any bullseyes on his back. So he won't come to these meetings because of this, you know, he doesn't want any bullseye, you know, on his back.
So what I'm asking is, can you gentlemen look into, you close the asphalt plant down, can somebody, you know, check out around the neighborhood in the middle of the night like these folks are saying? That we can't ignore it just because you shut it off if you have potential pollutants coming off the property. You know, people should be able to open their windows at night. In the winter we don't, but this time of the year we do. That's what we live for. Is that too much to ask? Or you look into?
We'll look into it.
Okay. I just see blank stares looking at me like I'm crazy. Anybody else?
That's a question. I'm a resident also, and I also work for PJ Keating. I was in the plant today. I don't usually work in there because I've lost my job because being shut down for 4 years. Douglas for that 52 Pembroke Ave, if anyone wants to know. But are you telling me there's been the benefit to anything we've done? Because I worked in there today, and I worked in the back of the asphalt plant out back, and it's 100% different. The quality, there's no odor on the grounds at all. And I'm not in there every day, so I'm not subject to it and got used to it. I'm amazed, actually, of what they've done there. And you sound like there's been no benefit at all from any of you. You're saying it's just as bad as 3 years ago, 4 years ago? You're gonna tell me that? It can't be. Not with what they've done. It's impossible. It's just your viewpoint hasn't changed.
Friday, I had to close the windows, and I couldn't sit outside.
Next door too. I can throw a rock onto the property.
You just asked a question. I'm answering your question. I don't want it. I don't want to eat the crap, period.
I think you're smelling something you've been wanting to smell for a long time.
Oh, wow.
Could you please tell me when you changed from the masking agent to the suppressant?
Yeah, so it's just happening, essentially. So really, I think the suppressant, I think, was received last week, and it's just coming into use now, essentially. So that's, I think, one of the things we're going to be really looking at here in the next 30 days is how that suppressant agent works.
Can I also ask, how far out in the community have you gone to check odors when you do your work?
We don't have a finite radius that we're hitting at the moment, but when we are going downwind, if we get to the point where we're a few streets, let's say the winds are out of the north and we're in the south, the neighborhood to the south, we will keep going until we don't detect any odors. So if we're getting no odors, and there's little to no odors at the property boundary, and we're working our way downwind and we're not detecting anything, we won't just keep going. But if we do get odors, we do keep going until we don't detect those odors anymore, to try to get the extent of them. Can I have a cardinal direction? I'm not.
Down Main Street, straight.
North? Is this north?
North, south,
So we
east
typically
and
do
west. I have to think.
those direct, the neighborhoods to the north and south. Last year there was a couple, one condition specifically I remember where there were easterly winds. So we were focusing more on the properties to the west of the site. Yeah, but again, I could look up the distances and do some measurements with the satellite imagery. No, we're coming out once a week regardless. It just happens to be that on a couple of those times there have been complaints that have come in during that time. So we're able to.
Is it okay if I speak to him?
Yes.
Okay, I've made 2 complaints. I've lived in Acushnet for 7 years, never had a problem with the plant because where I am, it's never traveled. The smell has never traveled. This year, it's traveled. So I've made 2 complaints because how will you know if something's not wrong, if something's wrong unless you make a complaint? So I've made the complaints. I was very happy with the man that came out and spoke with me. He explained things. He was really good. I haven't smelled it in the past week. That's why I wanted to know, because you mentioned you've made change.
1 week.
So the whole of all last week, I have not smelled anything up in my area where I live. I can't vouch for these people. I don't live in this area.
Where do you live?
I live out past near Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, so, and I haven't, I don't know if that's working. I don't know how the winds are. I don't know any of that stuff. That's not my job to know that, but I haven't really smelled it that bad. I haven't smelled it at all. And the man that came out, his name was Rick. It was you. I thought you looked familiar. I thought you did in a way. I thought it was you. Okay, I'm sorry. But it's not that bad. And this plant, the Tilcon, it was Warren Brothers, it was Tilcon, and now it's Keating. You guys have been in operation for a long time, and they're not going to shut down. There's no reason for them to shut down. But if you could just make the odor better, it would make everyone happy. And I can't vouch for these people. I don't know what they go through, and if they're going through, it sounds like they're going through a lot. But if you could pacify them and make them feel better, then that would be solution to the problem. So, this is a hostile environment right now, and it's sad. It's really sad. But closing down this plant, it's not an option. I owned an asphalt paving company. It was very convenient to have that plant there because it saved on trucking, it saved on fuel, it just saved on employee wages. I mean, it was a good thing to have here, and you guys showed a presentation of what you've done for the town. So if you can just pacify these odors and just...
Excuse me, you should have been here when they told us to all go pound sand, and they ended up in everything in court. You've only been here for 7 years, I've been here for 42. Most of these people have been here for 30-plus years dealing with this, and they've said right along, we'll do what we want, we're zoned industrial. Because they were given everything by a group of selectmen. Please.
She was trying to speak.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just to kiss your butts, that's all.
I'm not kissing anyone's butt.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not, sir. I am here because...
All right, we're gonna shut down the meeting if we don't get civilized.
You can't put people out of jobs, that's the horrible thing.
Does anybody have any more questions?
I do, yes. I'd like to address the board,
Yes.
if that's okay. I have a question. Do we still have air monitors? We are operating as Acushnet Board of Health?
We're supposed to.
Not? Then are they in the vicinity?
Joe? You wanna?
The city of New Bedford just got a grant from the EPA. They got 20 air monitors over there in the city of New Bedford. Because they're concerned about the health and welfare of their residents. And they want to improve the atmosphere.
Didn't you have one in your?
No, it was just for a brief. But that's not the point.
We had, at one particular time, we have a baseline that had been done.
All right.
This was, I forget exactly.
Do we still have?
No, they would have to come back out
All
again.
right, so we don't have access to any air monitoring right now?
No. It's not that we don't have access, it was based on the dust.
No, I realize it's particular.
Yeah.
But obviously, the asphalt plant creates particulate and VOC as well, right? Doesn't the air monitors pick up on VOC as well? No? I mean,
not like it, not like it would with the dust. Okay, I mean, that's all filtered.
I mean,
we have an expert
right here in the front yard of this facility would be prime.
We did.
But continuously. Just kind of back up what everyone is.
Again, we said, and that's absolutely the board's pleasure. We started that back when all of this began,
Right.
which was dust. It was based on dust. It had nothing to do with the odor of the asphalt plant at that point in time. And we put that baseline in place.
But I think we need to go back to some scientific data to back up, because no one seems to believe anyone about anything.
I don't think
they don't do anything wrong. We're a bunch of babies. I mean, it just goes back and forth.
I get that. I just
so
don't
scientific
think that
data, right? I mean, if
the air monitoring will produce anything that has to do with the odor. It's not. It was again.
What about an industrial hygienist? You know, I appreciate Alliance. I'm not familiar with Alliance. I've done a lot of testing over the years, exposure, air testing, and so forth. And you know what? It never failed. In the 40 years I was working, nothing ever failed. Everything always passed. It was miraculous. We never did anything wrong. Okay? We need some independent testing, I think, to back up our claims, is all I'm trying to say.
Neutral.
No, do you not agree? I don't
agree.
Getting too far out
for the board.
For
the board to decide.
Understandable, but I would appreciate if that could be taken into consideration, because I think scientific data is hard to, deny.
Are there any more? Did I ask you a question? Yeah, no, you. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Are there air monitors available that would detect odors? Like particulate matter that could be placed around the facility?
There's not really, that's why we go out and we either take bag samples and send them off to a lab for a panel analysis, or use the field olfactometer. You can measure for volatiles, you could measure for dust, but you're not measuring odors. in that regard.
There's nothing on the
real-time
market that we
instrumentation.
could look into putting out there?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Not for odors specifically.
Okay.
You would have to know, what you're looking to measure. You could measure different compounds, but not odors.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Leggio?
Thank you. I think we're just about done with our presentation. Certainly bringing Alliance on board, providing scientific data, that's the whole point. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We understand that this is an issue folks are very passionate about, and that's exactly why we thought, let's have Alliance come in and just put objective numbers to these things. Give us that scientific data. To that point, there were some comments made earlier about wind directions. Keating does have air monitors around the site, which do measure air wind directions at the property. So that's what Lou was mentioning earlier. They're able to base their visits and where they're going upwind, downwind, not just on sort of a more generic reading from the local airport, but it's actually site-specific right here. And it allows us to compile different types of information. So just like, for example, on this day, a complaint came in, you can see the arrow up there, the wind's flowing down in the other direction. That gives us a really good signal. Okay, this odor's almost certainly coming from somewhere else, and now we can investigate that. Other times, obviously, the readings look different, but that's just another example of objective scientific type data, meteorological data that Keating's compiling and considering as we're moving along here. And then looking ahead here, between now and the next meeting with the Board of Health in early July, what further actions are planned. As we've talked about a little bit here tonight, Keating has ordered this HMA odor suppressant, which is an additive. So the idea is to use that in place of the masking agents that have been used. And we'll see how that works. It's, as I said earlier, it's just coming into use now, essentially. So, we'll see. That'll be, I think, an interesting piece of information for us here over the next month or so.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
So they developed a suppressant. So how do they develop a suppressant without knowing what the odor is? You know, we're saying, okay, we don't have anything that monitors odor. There has to be something.
Well, they know
that will monitor odor.
They know it's causing.
So they know what's going into the mix.
They're doing it, yeah, so I could talk to that. So we've supplied EcoSorb with the primary manufacturer of the liquid asphalt we get. And in many cases, it comes from New Brunswick, from Irving, and they bring it to our terminal. So we provided them, and they took that to their labs, and they cook it, and then they use different molecules to try to identify what was the most effective. So the EcoSorb has a wide range of products. Some are masking agents, like they have a cherry and a pine, and it's a masking agent, right? Versus a suppressant. So they worked over the winter months and still we're trialing this. So they're looking for feedback from us now as we introduce it. So we're introducing the EcoSorb product at the terminal, right? So it's getting loaded into the tankers, and then the liquid asphalt is dropped in, it's blended there. It comes to our facility, is pumped off, and it's blended again and remixed. So we're experimenting with it. We're experimenting with dosage rates because in the lab it's a very controlled environment, and that's where they developed the product, right? So we're now bringing it out into the real world, and we have other external factors. When they develop it, it's under a hood and a container. Now we're dealing with the elements of an asphalt plant, in the environment. So we're going to continue to work on it. But initially, we're optimistic that working with EcoSorb, providing them feedback, the best batch of chocolate chip cookies probably comes from Grandma because she's made them the most, right? So she mixes and checks. We need to do the same thing. So we're starting at a dosage rate that they thought worked in the lab. We'll test that out. We'll then move it up. We don't want to change too many things at once because then we won't know what worked, right? So we'll identify a process and we'll introduce it and we'll test it. and then and if we think that we need to change it again, like maybe we add more to the dosage, the team will make the decision, okay, we're gonna add more product to the tank and see what that does, or, whatever it might be. But we don't want to change too many things at the same time, because then we won't be able to identify that this was the thing that made it better, right? So, using Crisco versus local dairy farm butter for your chocolate chip cookies. If you're gonna try it 1 and 1, you're not gonna know which was better, right? If you just mix the Crisco and the butter together, the kids are gonna eat them, but you may not be as happy as grandma, right? So we're really no different with what we're trying to do at the asphalt plant with the suppressant. Working with the manufacturer, we'll make small changes, but we're gonna make them consistently so that we can identify if it's good or bad, right? Because if it's bad, we're gonna stop, but we're gonna know that. But if we try to change 3 things at once, and we think it works, we don't really know what worked, right? So that's the process of where we are. So we're kind of working through the suppressant right now, and we'll get a week into it next week and kind of see where we are. Plus, we had to drain those tanks down because the product was not the same, right? So I think this week we should be at that point mixing this week that tank is 100% the EcoSorb suppressant, and we'll have a dosage rate recommended by them that we're starting with.
What happens to that material that you drain down?
It's consumed in the asphalt. Right, so you think about that liquid asphalt, right? That tank, the trucks come in, they fill those vertical tanks up, and then when Claudio's making hot mix each day, he's putting about 4.5 or 5% liquid asphalt into a load of hot mix, right? So, during a day, if we do 2,000 tons, and his liquid percentage, he's consuming, 4%, let's just use, that's an easy number, right? We can take that. 4% of the hot mix has liquid asphalt in it, so that tank is draining down that percentage point. So, we can drain a tank in a day.
Yes, sir.
Is there an MSDS sheet available with that being in the hot mix asphalt?
Yep, we can provide that. Happy to. So I'll put that on my to-do list.
It will be available through the board.
Yes, I'll bring that. We'll bring that and provide that information next week, along with some of the productivity and air permit information we discussed today. So I'll bring that. I'm just putting my notes together. So.
Okay. Thank you.
We've been going through this down since 2017 when it was brought before us, and there's been 2 times that it's gone before the courts and 2 cease and desist. How many more cease and desist do we have to go through before we can stop smelling this? That's my question. Do we have to keep playing and mixing this into the tanks and mixing that, oh, well, it don't smell today, oh, it smells tomorrow. A little bit more, a little bit less.
I'm hesitant to answer your question. That's why we have town council here. I don't want to, is still in litigation. We are still being sued personally. We're being sued as a Board of Health. There are still, I don't know if there's 10 or 11 members, prior employees of the town, as well as current people that are still being sued. So I'm going to have to reserve from not answering. I'm just not going to answer that. I'm sorry.
My question is, if you're all being sued and can't speak for us, who's fighting for us? If you gentlemen cannot fight for us because of litigation, who's going to fight for us? No, it's just back and forth, you're going to entertain us once a month?
Well, I'd like to think that we've made change. They've made a lot of changes in direct response to our actions as a board. I welcome you to come and take my seat. This is an enjoyable position to be in.
Because if I take your seat, they're going to sue me too.
That's correct.
So I'm not ignorant.
That's my guess.
I'm extremely intelligent. I understand the position that you're in. But what I'm saying is this is just a maneuver
How much longer do we have to go?
To hold us off so that they can do as they see
This
fit.
lawsuit has been going on for years already. And, I like Tom's, comment about Why can't it be moved to the back and just get it over with, you know?
That was my
That was the comment.
motion way back, but that hasn't happened. And that's why we're in court.
Right.
Somebody has to protect the safety and well-being of the residents.
But that's what I'm saying,
And
they
we've
put
tried to
you,
do
they
that, so
put
believe me,
you,
we have tried to do that. We've
but
been
they
doing the
put
best
you in a
we can.
position where you can't help
We're-
us.
we're-
So what are
we
you
almost
going
have
to
our
do for
hands
us? Are
tied
you counsel?
at that point.
So what are you going to do for us, sir?
Please
Well, within
do.
your legal limit, what will you do for us?
The answer is as far as you want to.
So there's been numerous court cases, the Superior Court, the Appeals Court. There's currently pending cases. The reason why PJ Keating is here today is that there was a temporary agreement, as Mr. Legier said, between the Board of Health and PJ Keating for 90 days to allow the plant to operate, so that in hopes of identifying the issues or making those necessary changes to abate the odor. So at the end of 90 days, the board, PJ Keating, and Council for All People are going to get together again and see, is this working? Is this not working? What further steps can we take? But we have numerous court cases. We have an opinion out of the appeals court that found that upheld the board's nuisance order, where the town is putting its best effort into addressing the problem. It's not a simple fix. There's a lot of different interests involved here, both residents and business and abutters and all that stuff. So if there was a magical solution to get it fixed for everyone, I think the whole board would take that. But this is what we have right now, is this temporary agreement. It's for 90 days. PJ Keating agreed to come 2 more meetings, and then the board can reassess at that time. And so the hope is that PJ Keating can continue making those adjustments to address the concerns.
Well, my concern is that they're going to continue to operate and do as they see fit, while 90 days for us is our entire summer, with our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors. Putting the children on the buses, and in my car with the windows open and the air conditioner on in winter because it stinks. And I'm like, I don't want to get out of the car and walk literally 1 block to the bus because it smells so bad. I mean, these kids have to put up with this. They're in their rooms on their tablets because it stinks outside. I don't think that's fair. And there are others who want to sit on their porch with a cup of coffee. They're trapped in their houses all winter long, and they want to come outside, and none of us can do this. You know what I mean? And it's like they're running and they're having a good old time, and we're all sitting with our windows closed. And our air conditioner is running until November because it stinks until they're closed down for winter. So we're paying extra money for our air conditioners to purify our air because we can't enjoy our backyards. So once again, we're waiting 90 days. It's an entire season for us, and we're all stuck inside now. So
I think somebody will be held responsible for loss of use, maybe some tax abatements or...
we should all get a tax
What kind of
credit.
road it's gonna go down because...
We should all get a tax credit because we can't enjoy our property that we're paying taxes on. So we're gonna get a break on our taxes. And you should be able to go to the assessment
So file
office
for an abatement.
and ask for a tax break.
Said documenting all the days sued for loss of use of our property.
The council's answered the question. Are there any other questions, any other comments from anybody in the room?
I have a question. Can the plant be moved back? Is that an option?
Yep. That's an option. That was an option way back in the day. That is still an option. That's what we're working to try to have happen.
Okay.
That's what I want to see happen.
It was in the back. They moved it.
Yeah, it was in the back.
It was in the back.
They were less
Right.
But there are still people in the back that are suffering.
It was
So
moved to the
whole
front
thing
because
is
they
not
need
fair.
to blast that area, that's why.
Exactly. But they were still hurting other people on the back of the property.
We still want it moved to the back.
We want to supersize the
Right
plant.
now, we have to deal with the court, we have to deal with PJ Keating, we have to, this isn't an easy, there's no easy fix, as he said. I can't elaborate on everything because I'm already in court as it is.
Why weren't the residents notified of the last meeting with the agreement that you all decided to to have a 90-day?
Court, I'll let counsel answer that. Her question is, why wasn't the public notified of the agreement?
Yeah.
For 90 days.
The trial run.
But we weren't allowed to vote on that.
It's a decision, that's a decision because the board and the members are named as parties. That was their, the court was looking for them to make the decision. It wasn't a town meeting vote or anything like that.
Why aren't we notified?
Yeah, why don't we notify? Well, in general, when there's litigation, it's taken under executive session. Because it's litigation, we can't discuss strategy about litigation in the open public.
So they sprung onto it.
My next question is, why couldn't it be on the 12th when it was found to be a nuisance? And why couldn't it exist in place? Why couldn't it continue? Why did it have to be, okay, we're gonna, give you a try and run, starting May 1st?
Like I said, it's a temporary agreement. The board can at the end of, so now we're 30 days in, so in 60 more days, could make a decision and say, we're not going to renew this temporary agreement and continue to seek to enforce the cease and desist, or they could decide that PJ Heating or the suppressants that they're using or anything like that are making steps and we could come to some sort of alternative agreement. It's a matter of the board gets to choose as a policy matter and the town gets to choose from a litigating perspective on how best to prosecute the case, and it's really fact dependent on what's going on that day or in that week. It depends on what's going on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I have an opportunity to speak?
Yes, sir.
Before you adjourn? So, a lot of the points that are being taken up tonight is being addressed through different dialogue with town council, soil board, and board of health. I wouldn't ask too much of the new suppressant that they're asking for. It is a suppressant, but the last thing we want them to do is add a suppressant that smells like bubble gum too much, and everybody's complaining about the smell of bubble gum now, right? There's people that complain about living around Burger King, the odor stinks until midnight and things that are like it. It really doesn't matter what the odor is. I live near a farm, White's Farm Dairy, my entire life with cow manure piles, and I had to deal with it because it was a right to farm, right? It's a farm to a degree. No matter what we, the town, would do in our relationship with PJ Keating, whether it is moving the asphalt plant out back or how great this suppressant could work, you will always smell odor of asphalt because it is an asphalt plant and that's what it does, right? You're never going to get away from 100% of that smell. What I think the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen and Town Council's done with PJ Keating, with letting them operate is, they've made modifications to that asphalt plant, and without the town giving them an opportunity to try to prove that those modifications are going to work or work better and is satisfactory to the town, how do they ever prove that to the town? That's why they'll be given this opportunity, is to continue making modifications as they've done. They've made large number of investments in that facility. They're putting in a new suppressant. They're trying to do their best to rid us of that odor. I'm not saying it's going to work, but they're trying. And we have to provide them an opportunity to at least prove that it's either going to work or it's going to fail. We have that obligation as a town with the litigation we have going on, and I believe that's what the Board of Health has done, and I believe that's what the Board of Selectmen have done by providing them that opportunity with a 90-day stay. I don't know if everyone, I see a few faces that I recognize as residents, and I see a lot of faces that I recognize as PJ Keating folks in the room. I can tell you this right now. I think we're sadly mistaken if we really think 100% of the asphalt odors are going away, right? It's not going to happen. They've been producing asphalt out back, I'll give them that, for 135 years, 150 years, and we all learned how to live with that little bit of odor, right? Can we get to that with the asphalt plant being out front? I don't know. That's for them to prove to us, right? That's dialogue that we're having with PJ Keating as we go through this process. That's all I can say. I commend the Board of Health Mr. Ford and Mr. DeVinian for their efforts in trying to work to their best with council, with PJ Keating, to allow them to operate and bringing them in every 30 days for questions and answering complaints. That's what that process was designed to do. That's exactly what the Board of Health members, Mr. Ford and Elisa and Mr. DeVinian are doing right now. So I commend them for their efforts, and we're going to continue working with PJ Keating to try to resolve the issue. That's the best that we can do as a town, right? I mean, we got millions of dollars of lawsuits. We're trying to resolve the problem and work and become a partner with PJ Keating and not be fighting with them every time, costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars, because that's where the bill's at right now. I'll tell you right now, that bill's over $500,000, right? It's money well spent thus far, but there's sooner or later we got to figure this out so that we're not continuing to spend. And I don't think PJ Keating, even though his attorney's sitting there and town's attorney's sitting there, is saying, keep feeding me that money, right? I don't think PJ Keating, Mr. Hill's sitting here going, yeah, I really want to give my council another $1 million to litigate this with the town of Acushnet. It's in both of our interests to figure this out and how we're going to coexist, as I've said before, get the playbook, and that's how we're going to operate. And there might be a dozen people that don't like it. I don't know if I'm ever going to make a dozen people 100% satisfied. But as long as the majority of the people in the community are satisfied, I think that's what matters. And, you know, for the other 12, 15, 20, whatever it may be, that just wants to be constant and never be good enough, whatever PJ Keating does, it's sad, but it's going to be the way of life. I'm sorry to say it. We're trying.
That was what is coming after us.
Thank you for your comments, Selectman Gasper. Does anybody else have anything final to say before I adjourn the meeting? Mr. Legier?
No, nothing further, thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries.